Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India counters Trump's tariff threat, terms US and EU criticism unjustified and unreasonable, says will take all necessary steps to safeguard its interest and economy. Philippines President Marcos to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his first state visit to India. Key agreements to be exchanged. Six years of Article 370 abrogation, a historic turning point in India's constitutional and political journey. Investments, infra upgrades, tourist footfall hike, marked changes in Jammu and Kashmir. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to update Gaza conflict strategy ahead of key UNSC meeting, while airdrop humanitarian assistance continues to reach. Brazil's former President Bolsonaro put under house arrest after defying the court's order in a move that could escalate tensions with the administration of US President Donald Trump. The Indian government has strongly hit back at the US after Donald Trump threatened to substantially raise tariffs on goods from India over its purchase of Russian oil. In a statement issued by the Ministry of External Affairs, the government stated that it has been targeted by the United States and EU over its purchase of Russian oil. It said that India began importing from Russia because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe after the outbreak of the conflict. The United States at that time actively encouraged such imports by India for strengthening global energy markets stability. The government added that India's imports are meant to ensure predictable and affordable energy costs to the Indian consumer. They are a necessity compelled by global market situation. However, it is revealing that the very nations criticizing India are themselves indulging in trade with Russia. Unlike our case, such trade is not even a vital national compulsion. The ministry put forth figures of EU's oil trade with Russia, saying in 2024 they had a bilateral trade of of 67.5 billion euros in goods with Russia. In addition, it had trade in services estimated at 17.2 billion euros in 2023. This is significantly more than India's total trade with Russia that year or subsequently. European imports of LNG in 2024, in fact, reached a record 16.5 million tons, surpassing the last record of 15.21 million tons in 2022. The government also mentioned that Europe-Russia trade includes not just energy, but also fertilizers, mining, products, chemicals, iron and steel, and machinery and transport equipment. Talking about the US, the MEA said that America continues to import from Russia uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry, palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers as well as chemicals. Thus, the Indian government categorically stated in this background that targeting of India is unjustified and unreasonable. It also clearly stated that like any other major economy, India will take all necessary measures to safeguard its national interests and economic security. In a significant diplomatic development, Philippines President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has begun his first state visit to India, describing the country as a valued friend. On his 5-day visit, President Marcos is scheduled to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the national capital. Both the leaders will hold bilateral talks. Later in the day, the visiting dignitary will also meet his Indian counterpart Draupadi Murmu. On his arrival on Monday, President Marcos met External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. The leaders exchanged their views on key topics. They asserted that this visit will significantly deepen our bilateral partnership. Diplomatic relations between India and the Philippines were established in November 1949. Both the countries have since developed a strong partnership across a wide spectrum of areas, including trade and investment, defense and security, maritime cooperation, agriculture, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and digital technologies. The two countries also engage closely at regional level, including through India's comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN. India's relations with the Philippines are an integral pillar of our Act East policy, Vision Mahasagar, and our vision of the Indo-Pacific. The forthcoming state visit of President Marcos coincides with the 75th anniversary of India-Philippines diplomatic relations. This visit is an opportunity for both the leaders to set the path for future bilateral cooperation and also to engage on regional and international issues of mutual interest. As the monsoon session of Parliament continues, reports of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance will be presented in the upper house of the Parliament. Also, reports of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Energy. The House will also take up the Carriage of Goods by Sea Bill 2025. The bill will provide for responsibilities, liabilities, rights and immunities attached to carriers with respect to the carriage of goods by sea. The lower house of the Parliament, or Lok Sabha, will take up the readjustment of representation of scheduled tribes in the assembly constituencies of the state of Goa Bill 2024. The Merchant Shipping Bill 2024 will also be tabled for consideration and passage. The bill will consolidate and amend the law relating to merchant shipping to ensure compliance with India's obligation under the maritime treaties. The National Democratic Alliance Parliamentary Party meet is scheduled to take place on Tuesday at the Parliament Library building. The meeting will be attended by NDA members from Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha have witnessed repeated adjournments over the opposition's insistence on a demand for the discussion on SIR in poll-bound Bihar. Amid opposition protests, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju said that following an all-party meeting, time had been allotted in the BAC meeting to discuss the National Sports Bill and the Anti-Doping Bill. He urged members not to waste the time of the House and condemned their stance. August 5th marks a historic turning point in India's constitutional and political journey. On this day in 2019, the Government of India revoked Article 370, ending the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, a move hailed by many as a step towards integration, equality and development. 5 years on, we look back at the constitutional transformation, the intense parliamentary debate and the positive changes on the ground. Here's our special report.
Article 370 was introduced as a temporary provision in 1949, drafted by N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar. It granted special status to Jammu and Kashmir, allowing the state to have its own constitution, its own flag, and considerable autonomy, except in matters of defense, foreign affairs, and communication. This provision was based on the Instrument of Accession signed in 1947 by Maharaja Hari Singh after Pakistan-backed forces invaded the region. Over the decades, Article 370 created a unique constitutional setup, one that remained contentious. On August 5th, 2019, a decisive move was made. The government, invoking the powers of the President under Article 371, issued a presidential order redefining the term Constituent Assembly to mean the Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. With the state under President's rule at the time, Parliament assumed legislative powers and passed concurrent resolutions in the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, effectively abrogating Article 370 and rendering Article 35A inoperative.
अनुच्छेद 370 के खंड 3 द्वारा प्रदत्त शक्तियों का प्रयोग करते हुए राष्ट्रपति संसद की सिफारिश पर यह घोषणा करते हैं कि यह दिनांक जिस दिन भारत के राष्ट्रपति द्वारा इस घोषणा पर हस्ताक्षर किए जाएंगे और इसे सरकारी गैजेट में प्रकाशित किया जाएगा, उस दिन से अनुच्छेद 370 के सभी खंड लागू नहीं होंगे, सिवाय खंड 1 के नामक तदनुसार पढ़ा जाएगा.
It wasn't just a constitutional maneuver, It was a moment of high drama and passionate debate in the parliament. In the Lok Sabha, the resolution to revoke Article 370 was passed with 351 votes in favour and 72 against, with one abstention. The Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Bill 2019 was also cleared, paving the way to bifurcate the state into two union territories, Jammu and Kashmir with a legislature and Ladakh without one. A day earlier, Rajya Sabha had also passed a resolution marking an unprecedented constitutional development. In December 2023, the Supreme Court upheld the abrogation in a unanimous verdict, observing that Article 370 was always meant to be temporary. The court also stated that Jammu and Kashmir had no internal sovereignty separate from India, and the Indian constitution now fully applies to the region.
कि 370 से जम्मू कश्मीर का और विशेषकर घाटी के युवाओं का भला नहीं हुआ है। आतंकवाद के रास्ते पर जो युवा गए सबको, मैं तो जिनके मन में अलगाववाद की भी भावना है या 370 के लिए भी जो लोग सोचते हैं कि हमारा कुछ छिन गया, मैं सबको विनम्र भाव से कहना चाहता हूं ये सदन का उपयोग कर कि आप हिसाब किताब तो करिए कि आपको 370 से क्या मिला। रोटी मिली, शिक्षा मिली, सुख सुविधा रोजगारी मिली, आरोग्य मिला, क्या मिला 370 से? क्यों झुनझुना पकड़े हुए हो? 370 है, वो जाने से धीरे धीरे हम घाटी के सभी लोगों को अपने नजदीक ला पाएंगे। उनके मन के अंदर एक नई आशा, नया उमंग, वहां पर जो विकास होगा।
Since the abrogation, the region has witnessed significant decline in terror incidents, stone pelting and separatist violence. The improved national security and increased presence of central laws, the law and order situation has seen marked improvement. For the first time, several central welfare schemes became accessible to people of Jammu and Kashmir, especially to women, scheduled caste, and other marginalized communities. Discriminatory local laws were repealed, bringing gender justice and social equity in line with the rest of India. Tourism, which is the backbone of the region's economy, has seen a sharp rise. New industrial schemes like Prime Minister's Development Package and the Industrial Development Scheme have attracted investments and created job opportunities for the local youth. As Jammu and Kashmir embarks on a new journey within the constitutional framework of India, the abrogation of Article 370 remains a watershed moment. A move once called bold and controversial is now credited by many for unlocking peace, prosperity, and parity for the region. Bureau Report, DD India.
You're watching DD India Live. We're heading for a short break. Stay with us. After the break, we tell you a massive wildfire devastates swaths of land in California. Over 190 countries try to iron out differences on the first ever global plastics treaty. We also get you how India turned the tables around, thrashing England by a 6-run victory at the Oval.
Jharkhand will mesmerize you with majestic nature, rich heritage and colorful culture.
Johar. It fits perfectly.
Thank you.
Full workout हो गया.
Ready?
Postcards from Jharkhand on National Geographic.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live. Moving on to West Asia updates now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will convene his security cabinet on Tuesday to decide on Israel's next steps in Gaza following the collapse of indirect ceasefire talks with Hamas. It comes a day before a UN Security Council meeting on the fate of hostages still held in the Palestinian territory. Last Saturday, during a visit to the country, U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff said that he was working with the Israeli government on a plan that would effectively end the conflict in Gaza. But Israeli officials have also floated ideas, including expanding the military offensive in Gaza and annexing parts of the shattered enclave. The failed ceasefire talks in Doha had aimed to clinch agreements on a US-backed proposal for a 60-day truce, during which aid would be flown into Gaza and half of the hostages Hamas is holding would be freed in exchange for Palestinian prisoners jailed in Israel. The envoy's visit was seen in Israel as very significant, but later on Sunday, the Israeli officials signaled that pursuit of a deal would be pointless, threatening more force. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar suggested on Monday that the gaps were still too wide to bridge. Canada delivered humanitarian assistance through airdrops to Gaza, again accusing Israel of violating international law. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reported that it was Canadian Armed Forces' first humanitarian airdrop over Gaza using their own aircraft. The Israeli military said 120 food aid packets for Gaza's residents were airdropped by 6 countries, including Canada. The other 5 were Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Germany, and Belgium. Canada said last week that it plans to recognize the state of Palestine at a meeting of the United Nations in September, ratcheting up pressure on Israel as starvation spreads in Gaza. Canada also said on Monday that Israeli restrictions have posed challenges for humanitarian agencies. Finland's President Alexander Stubb held a phone call with US President Donald Trump to discuss Russia-Ukraine conflict and supporting efforts for an immediate ceasefire on Monday. Trump has threatened to impose new sanctions on Russia and buyers of its oils, including India and China, unless President Putin agrees to end the conflict by Friday. Both leaders are also discussing the ongoing talks about icebreakers. Earlier in June, Trump said that the U.S. is negotiating to buy 15 icebreakers from Finland as part of his broader plan to acquire up to 40 icebreakers to strengthen Arctic security and support resource development and logistics. Brazil's Supreme Court on Monday issued a house arrest order for former President Jair Bolsonaro, who is standing trial for alleging plotting a coup, in fact. Justice Alexandre de Moraes said in his decision that the right-wing firebrand did not comply with judicial restraining orders imposed on him last month. Moraes also banned Bolsonaro from receiving visits, with exceptions for lawyers and people authorized by the court and use of a cell phone either directly or through third parties. The restrictions on Bolsonaro were imposed over allegations that he courted the interference of Trump, who recently tied steep new tariffs on Brazilian goods. The former Brazilian leader is facing charges that he conspired with dozens of his allies to overturn his 2022 electoral loss. Bolsonaro's press representative confirmed the house arrest order and restrictions on using a cell phone. The United States on Monday condemned a decision by Brazil's Supreme Court to put former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro under house arrest. The department's Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs said in a post on X, and I quote, "Putting even more restrictions on Jair Bolsonaro's ability to defend himself in public is not a public service. Let Bolsonaro speak." Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar will be visiting Bangladesh later this month. Reacting on which, Bangladesh Foreign Affairs Advisor Tawheed Hussain said that all outstanding bilateral issues, including those rooted in the events of 1971, will be on the discussion table. He told reporters in Dhaka when asked whether Bangladesh would raise the long-pending matters of a public apology from Pakistan and financial compensation related to the 1971 Liberation War. Dar is scheduled to arrive in Dhaka on August 23rd on a bilateral visit aimed at enhancing diplomatic coordination. He will hold official talks with advisor Tawheed Hussain on October 24th alongside other engagements. Bangladesh formally raised the issues of Pakistan's long overdue apology and unsettled financial liabilities during Foreign Secretary-level consultations held in Dhaka on April 17th. In Bangladesh, the July declaration will be presented before the nation today at a public gathering in Dhaka, expected to be attended by Chief Advisor of the Interim Government of Bangladesh, Professor Muhammad Yunus. The July declaration is an official declaration of the July mass uprising of 2024 in Bangladesh. The declaration, reportedly prepared under strict confidentiality, outlines 26 points addressing political, constitutional and governance issues. Disagreements persist among political parties regarding the content of the declaration, as well as whether it should be incorporated into the constitution. A preliminary draft of the charter was released on July 28th this year, following a series of consultations involving 30 political parties. A massive wildfire on Monday was threatening hundreds of homes in central California after injuring at least 3 people as it tore through Los Pedros National Forest. Authorities said that the fire is located within the Los Pedros National Forest, which spans parts of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. While local media said more than 1,000 firefighters were battling the blaze from the ground and air, according to Santa Barbara County Fire Department, the fire is threatening about 360 homes, with evacuation orders in place for some areas south of Highway 166. The National Weather Service warned that Southern California will face elevated fire danger amid gusty winds in the coming week. Over 190 countries will try to break an impasse and reach an agreement over the next fortnight on the first ever global plastics treaty that will create a legally binding framework to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Now, this will be the second installment of the 5th meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee of the UN, which will take place in Geneva, Switzerland. Negotiators will pick up from the previous meeting in Busan, South Korea, last December, where talks had collapsed over critical and unresolved issues. Plastic pollution has reached even the most remote corners of the planet today. 460 million tons of plastic is produced annually, of which only 9% is recycled, while the rest leaks into the environment. Let's talk of sports now. India scripted a remarkable comeback to pull a famous 6-run victory at the Oval, denying England the series win. What turned out was a dramatic end to a thrilling test series. Here's how the action unfolded at the Oval. Take a look.
Curtains were drawn in a dramatic fashion to the Anderson Tendulkar Trophy in the 5th and final test match at the Oval. India clinched their narrowest win in test cricket, one that would be remembered for ages. Mohammad Siraj inspired India to a famous 6-run win in what turned out to be a fitting end to the test series. Along with Prasidh Krishna, Siraj snatched victory for India from the jaws of defeat. India set England 374 runs to win and draw the series. In reply, England were on a bit of a pickle at 106 for 3. However, Harry Brook and Joe Root launched the counter-attack to push India on the back foot. But late on day 4, as the condition turned conducive to bowling, India managed to pick 3 wickets, and England, 301 for 3 at one stage, lost their 7 wickets for 66 runs, a collapse prompted by Brooks' reckless dismissal after he had made a superb century. India suddenly had a chink of hope and they took full advantage, removing Jacob Battle and Joe Root before bad light and rain ended the 4th day early. Then turned out Siraj, India's hero, dismissing Jamie Smith and Jamie Overton before bowling Gus Atkinson to complete a 5-wicket haul. After Prasidh Krishna had bowled Josh Tongue for naught, Chris Wokes walked out to bat wearing a sling to protect his dislocated shoulder with 17 runs still needed. Atkinson hit Siraj for 6 to give England brief hope and cleverly protected Wokes from the strike. But Siraj produced another brilliant Yorker to earn India their narrowest ever win. India took the last 4 wickets in under an hour to bowl out England for 367. England still needed 35 runs to complete their second highest test run chase and by far the largest for any team on this venue. The Oval was full of the final act of series that fluctuated wildly over 7 weeks and under grey skies in an atmosphere of unremitting tension as one of the most dramatic endings in a test match duly played out. Sports Desk, DD India.
From cricket to tennis now, the 24 times Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from the Cincinnati Open for the second consecutive year. The Serbian tennis icon opted out of the US Open warm-up tournament following consecutive semi-final exits at the French Open and Wimbledon. Djokovic had stated earlier that he wants to preserve his body and stay fit for the Grand Slams. Djokovic is chasing a record-breaking 25th Grand Slam title but has not come close to lifting a Grand Slam title this calendar year. He also withdrew from Cincinnati last year after his triumph in the singles event at the Paris Olympics. The US Open will take place from August 24 to September 7th in New York City. US President Donald Trump will sign an executive order to create an Olympics task force to handle security and other issues related to the 2028 Summer Olympic Games. The task force will coordinate federal, state and local government work on transportation. It will also streamline visa processing and credentialing for foreign athletes, coaches, officials and media. The United States will host the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. Last month, organizers released the first look at the Olympic competition schedule. That's it in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can download the respective QR codes. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.